right, and welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I'm your host, Courtenay, and I'm super passionate about moving and thinking. On this show, we are going to dive into all things health, fitness, personal development, lifestyle, and political sociocultural. I've always been fascinated by people, and I love learning from the experiences and stories of others. This has been a treat for me, and I hope this is enjoyable and useful for you. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or any way that I can make this a better experience for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Hello, welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I'm here today with my friend Jeremy Boring, who does not live up to his name, fortunately. And he is known as the God King, co-founder, co-CEO of the Daily Wire. That might be how you would know him. How are you doing today, Jeremy?
I'm doing great, Courtenay. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. So we recently reconnected. You used to be in LA and we recently reconnected in Nashville. Can you tell me a little bit about what made you decide Nashville and how that's been for you?
Yeah, well, you don't need me to tell you how much LA has changed over the last 36 months. When I tell people who I meet in Nashville that LA has changed, they all nod and say, oh, you know, COVID's changed everything. But that's not what's happening. LA started changing earlier than that. It really started changing, I think, when Gavin Newsom was elected to be governor of the state. It started changing in earnest, and a lot of the policies that he sort of pioneered in his time in San Francisco were, even before his governorship, starting to trickle down into the rest of the state. And homelessness out of control, crime going through the roof, a fundamental transformation of the city. You know, if you were in Southern California 5 years ago, unless you were on Venice Beach or something, you'd probably never seen a tent set up for someone to live in just on the side of the street. If you go to LA today, every single underpass, every single abandoned lot, every single closed business now is a homeless encampment. Again, not just because of COVID, because of these policies that have been really percolating for many years in the state and now are bearing all of their fruit. You know, I had a experience with my wife in the early fall of 2020, where I heard, we were laying in bed. It was Saturday morning, and I heard the gate slam in my backyard. And I laid there for a minute. I thought, I don't know what this is. You know, why is the gardener here on the weekend? Or the pool guy, like those kinds of thoughts. And I finally just got up and looked out the back window, and there's a homeless guy in my backyard with all of his belongings sitting on my furniture, my outdoor furniture. So, you know, I think, well, this stinks. You know, it's a very nice neighborhood, what you'd call south of the boulevard in the San Fernando Valley, kind of where the nicer homes are, and south of Ventura Boulevard. I go to my gun safe because you don't know what to expect here, right? I put on some pants. I go downstairs and open my back door. And the time it took me to do all of that, he has taken the cover off of my jacuzzi in the backyard, and he has his pants around his ankles, and he's taken a crap in my flower bed. And I guess then he was going to get in the hot tub and wash himself. And I'm kind of in shock, right? And I say, hey, buddy, you know, back there. Man, he jumps up, and, you know, it's an embarrassing thing for both of us. He jumps up, he pulls his pants up, you know, he goes, just inspecting the property. And I said, well, we're not doing any inspections today, pal. And he said, oh yeah, my mistake. You know, I didn't press the issue or anything. I didn't want to humiliate him further, and certainly didn't take any sort of threatening action, and he didn't take any threatening action toward me. And but it was both embarrassing, I think, you know, for him. I mean, it's a erosion of his dignity to have somebody catch him in that sort of situation.
Sure. But
here I am. I had just adopted a daughter only a month or two before this, in a very expensive home in a very expensive neighborhood in LA. And I just thought, man, this city is gone. This is broad daylight, you know, in the morning when people are home on the weekend, and this guy's just helping himself to my yard. It's not that I don't have sympathy for people who are living in those circumstances, but it is, you know, if you're going to live in Southern California, if you're going to pay the highest income tax rate in the country, put up with the worst traffic in the country, what are you getting for that? If the answer is you're getting homeless guys crapping in your flower bed and taking baths in your jacuzzi while your 2-month-old baby is sleeping upstairs, it's not much of a bargain.
No, no. Wow. So what made you decide Nashville of all places?
Yeah, no one was more surprised than me. I'm a Texan. It's hard to get Texas out of a Texan. My business partner Caleb Robinson, also a Texan, and very deep roots there.
Hmm.
Always assumed that if we left Southern California, the natural place for the business would be Texas.
Right.
Um, when we made the decision to go, we got on a plane. We went to Dallas. We thought, obviously, this is where we're going to end up. And as I looked around the city, I could not find the sort of artistic, media savvy community that we need to continue to grow our business. We're working with commercial realtors and looking at all these high rises in downtown Dallas. And Caleb and I are overlooking the city on, I don't know, the 30th floor of some building. And it was almost like that scene in Genesis. I looked out across all I could survey and I said, Caleb, if you can find me just 10 men with even like a graphic arts associates in graphic arts from some community college, I will move here. And Caleb, like Abraham before him, said, what if I found 5? Maybe we could find 5. So we thought, well, maybe, as much as Dallas, by the way, one of the great cities, probably the best city in America in terms of lifestyle, right? You have great cost of living, easy access, best airport in the country, easy access to anywhere in the continent, baseball, football, basketball teams, just everything you could want in terms of livability. Not the right place for our company, unfortunately. So we go to Austin. We thought, well, maybe Austin. And sure enough, Austin has, it's very hip, very media savvy, very artistic, but it doesn't have any of the livability. The cost of living incredibly high, traffic incredibly bad. Unfortunately, they've learned all the wrong lessons about how to deal with homelessness from California. And we just thought, what are we offering our people if we move here? They're going to pay just as much in rent. They're going to commute just as far. I mean, it's a hard sell to give up LA, which is the center of the universe. I mean, you truly have the entire world at your fingertips there, to come to like lesser LA with all of LA's problems.
Right.
So just on a whim, we were both exhausted. It was time to get back to LA. And I said, let's change our tickets and go see Nashville. He said, what's in Nashville? I said, I don't know. I've only been there once. He's like, well, I've only been there once. I was like, yeah, but I have a feeling. And my feeling is that Nashville is kind of like Dallas plus Austin divided by 2. You get some of the livability and some of the artistry. And so we came out, we were both exhausted. Within 12 hours, we knew this is the right city for our business.
Wow.
It still took 3 more trips to Texas, though, to kill the dream. We went back to Austin, back to Dallas again. And eventually we realized, the thing that we felt when we were in Nashville is right. It's a place where our people can have a real improvement in their quality of life, but where we can also continue to grow this media company that we've been nurturing.
Yeah, that's awesome. What have you found are the biggest shifts in in taking your company across the country?
Yeah, well, we've been fortunate in one regard. 86% of our people made the move with us, which is an unbelievable retention and probably speaks to how bad things have become in LA. I'll give you a positive and negative. I'll start with the negative. Nashville's a great city. It's a really fun place, very artsy, live music, wonderful food, kind people. But it doesn't have hustle the way that people hustle in LA. It's a little bit like island time when you're in Hawaii, and no one can get anything done ever. It's not quite that, but there is a vibe in the South where it's sort of like, oh yeah, man, we'll get to that. Oh yeah, man, that's going to work out. Like, no, I'd like for it to work out right now.
Right now. Yeah.
Post haste.
The New Yorker in me really understands this. Yeah.
Yeah. That has been a tough adjustment. You'll call somebody and be like, hey, there's a hole in my fence and I don't want my child to crawl into the swimming pool. Oh yeah, man, we'll get somebody out there here and we'll get that taken care of. It's been 8 weeks since that phone call. That's the truth. It's just they keep a different tempo. And in LA, everybody's always hustling. And the reason is because LA is a hard town. New York, a hard town. I mean, that's 2 cities that are constantly trying to defeat you. And because of that, everyone is always at their best because you're just being refined by reality. You have to be at your best or it'll crush you. It's not that way here. I mean, in many ways, because this is a great place, it's not as hard. And so people just aren't, they're not battling against reality in that same way. And that comes with some really nice qualities. People are very friendly. People are very kind, but it comes with some challenges too. It's harder to get business done. It's harder to kind of motivate people to step up their game.
Totally. And then the positives.
The positives, I would go back to, first of all, it's a beautiful, beautiful town. If you've spent any time here at all, we got here 2 days after the election. So the very first week of November, or first full week of November. Unbelievable, the vistas, you know, as we're landing, flying over the city, all the leaves have changed. It's these golds and reds. It's so beautiful. Now it's spring. Everything's turning green. There's these beautiful pear trees with these white and pink blossoms. So, you know, it's not Southern California in terms of the weather, but it is a truly beautiful place. The people, well, I'd like to sort of kick them in the ass every now and then and make them move a little faster. They couldn't be more welcoming. They couldn't be more kind. Believe it or not, the food, terrific. One negative in LA, as you know, you have the greatest produce in the world year round. And here it's like, if you buy a bag of spinach and you don't use it that day, it wilts. You know, it's just a little different, but the food scene, nevertheless, here, really good. And I'll tell you, and one amazing thing, since we've been here, the state legislature passed a resolution welcoming the Daily Wire. Today, they're passing a resolution welcoming Candace Owens, and the governor invited us to have dinner at the executive residence. You know, just like California, the exact same way we were treated in California.
Exact same way, exactly. When I was actually there, my realtor she was trying to sandwich me in between a bunch of other things that she had, and she had actually dawned on me that one of the meetings you might want to come with me to. And I was like, okay, what is it? And it was a town hall meeting. And I was just blown away. I had never experienced anything like this in my life. You know, I've lived in New York and California, and New York City and Los Angeles. I had never experienced people like this. I had never experienced government like this. It was very refreshing to see people really asking tough questions. You know, the constituents were really holding their representatives accountable. And what was very interesting to me was how important values were. It wasn't just policy, but values was something they really cared about. And that was very different for me to experience.
It's also, it's a blue city in a red state, as opposed to the places where you and I have lived, you know, in LA and New York, blue cities and blue states. A blue city in a red state means people are used to talking across the political divide because they have to talk across the political divide, right? You in LA, they basically shut you out if you're conservative. They don't need your support. They don't need your vote. They don't care what you think. I find that out here, it's not that people are any less passionate, but they're more willing, more readily willing to engage because you have to.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You were saying how, like, you think partly because it's such a great place is why people are essentially complacent. Do you think that is reflective in any way of why the country is in the state that it's in?
That's interesting. Yeah, I do actually, for a couple of reasons. One is that, you know, the one that's probably been discussed a lot is just that for conservatives, politics are political and life is not. You know, your life is based on values. Your life is based on community. Your life is based on family. Yeah. And so the left doesn't see the world that way. For them, almost every decision is a political decision. You know, association, political, economics, political. And so, of course, we're at a natural disadvantage as conservatives when it comes to politics, because the only time we're thinking politically is when we're thinking politically. And they are thinking politically all the time. Now, that is changing a little bit in the era of Trump, maybe even in the era of Obama, beginning with the Tea Party. Conservatives have begun to become more political. And I actually think that that's a tragedy, because our hope is not a political hope. politics cannot, if you believe what we essentially believe, then you necessarily believe that there is not a political solution to what ails our country. There's not a political solution to what ails our citizenry. There's not a political solution to the problem of us, to what ails us individually. It's good from a tactical point of view. We should be better at politics because a lot of fights are political, but it's a real tragedy that everything now is becoming political, and that we're going along with it because we have to. But I do think too that yes, conservatives by and large don't live in the urban centers, and the urban centers are difficult. Thomas Jefferson said basically when people start living on top of one another in cities, this whole concept of Republican government won't be able to stand. And in some ways that's true. When I grew up in a very small town in rural Texas. Our friends Ann and Phelan were at my wedding, and they had never fired a gun before. And so during my wedding reception, which was at my parents' home, the band is playing, and my bride is throwing her bouquet to the bridesmaids, and I'm loading up the AR-15 and letting these Irishmen fire rounds into the cotton field across the street. That when you can stand on your front porch and fire your AR-15 into the cotton field, government is an abstract, faraway thing. When you live in an apartment in Southern California and you have people above you and below you and through this wall and through that wall, you need a lot more help from some sort of governing bodies, be it an HOA or a landlord or the city council or whatever, to help you manage just the sheer number of individual transactions that are always causing people to ram into one another. And so, yeah, if you live in the cities, you're far more prepared for government because government is a far more necessary thing. I've said for a long time, I can't remember the year. I believe it was 2010. But I think that when they write the grand history of our time, COVID will be a footnote, and 9/11 probably as unbelievably impactful as it was to us will be a footnote, right? It was a small thing that happened in one country, not an event that affected the people of the globe. I think that what they will remember from our time, like the monumental thing, will be that for the very first time, more people on planet Earth lived in urban environments than in rural environments. That happened within the last decade for the first time in human history.
Yeah.
And when I say they'll remember it above even things that we care, we don't think about that. Most people watching may not even know that happened. And they're like, how could that be more important than 9/11? Yeah. It's not more important to us than 9/11, but when it comes to the far-reaching historical implications, a century from now, 2 centuries from now, 3 centuries from now, that's a turning point in the affairs of man. It's when people went from the majority of people not needing government in their day-to-day lives to the majority of people needing government in their day-to-day lives. And we will not live, and our grandchildren will not live to see the full impact of that change.
Yeah, absolutely. That I was really shocked when I learned that. And I had to do a lot of digging. I'm like, no, that can't be true. I didn't believe it,
Right.
I'm like, the planet's so big, there are only so many cities. That's not possible. But alas, it is. So yeah, very interesting. And I just wanted to, that's so funny. So you taught Ann and Phelan how to shoot. You taught me how to shoot as well.
That's right. I took you shooting for the first time, didn't I? I forgot that.
Yep. It's your gun.
Listen, in Southern California, I felt like it was my moral duty. I won't name everyone who I took either to fire a gun for the first time or to purchase a gun for the first time. But the list is long and notable of people who I corrupted.
You're doing your civic duty to uphold the Second Amendment. That's awesome. Yeah. I actually, and I didn't know this, but your first film experience was also because you knew how to pray and you knew how to shoot.
Yeah, it's sort of a funny thing. I was 21 and I'd moved to LA. I'd never been west of Clovis, New Mexico, until I come bounding into LA with all my worldly goods, which were not many. And I didn't know anyone. I didn't know the city. I got the only apartment I could afford. It was in Panorama City, which is at that time, keep in mind, this was a little over 20 years ago. My apartment was a good baseball throw away from a McDonald's that shared a parking lot with a strip club. And so, it was all like Happy Meals by day. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a rough neighborhood at that time. And I got this opportunity. Somebody suggested, as they do to everyone who moves to LA, that I do background work, be an extra in a film or television show, so that you can see how it all works and make a couple bucks. Yeah. And you make like $50 for 15-hour days, or so. You make $50 for 12, and then if it goes 15, maybe you got up to $75. And so the very first thing that I booked, day one of trying to do this in LA, was believe it or not, it was a film about the Revolutionary War, and they needed people to put on the Continental Army blue and go out there and run across a hill, And so you get there, it's before the sun even comes up, right? It's like 5 a.m. or something. You're on some film ranch up north of town, up the 118 or something. And they came out, the director came out and said, it wasn't the director, it was a second or somebody. And they came out and said, "Hey, does anybody know how to fire a gun?" Texan,
Yeah.
He's like, "Hey, great news. We're going to give you a flintlock. You know how to fire black powder?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "We're going to give you a flintlock, and you're going to sit up here on the hill, and you get to fire flintlocks all day, so that there's puffs of smoke and stuff coming out while everybody else runs around and dies." I was like, "Well, this is great. I don't have to run around all day. I get to basically perch on a hill and shoot a gun. I can do this all day long." There were 4 or 5 of us out of there may have been 200 background actors there. This day is a big battle scene. It also meant that I got a little bit of a pay bump. So instead of making $50 for the day, I was going to make like $50 a day plus $15.
You're now a stunt actor.
You're now a stunt actor, yeah. And so, I was happy. And so all morning, that's what I do. I go and work with the stunt team, and I sit up on the hill, and I, do flash pans and stuff all day. And then it's lunchtime. And, people may not know this, but the film sets are very much segregated between non-union background actors and union background actors. Union background actors essentially get to eat with everybody. And sometimes you're still separated from some of the crew, but you get to eat what everybody eats.
Right.
The non-union background actors, they give you like bologna sandwiches.
Yeah.
It's truly, I was a union background actor one time on a Steven Spielberg movie, and the union background actors had our own base camp. There were ice sculptures on our tables, and they served us lobster tail for lunch.
Wow.
I met my wife doing a non-union extra job at the Great Western Forum, a movie called When Billy Beat Bobby, about Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs. And they served us bologna sandwiches. Very segregated environment. So because I was shooting the flintlock, I got the good food, so I'm really happy. I don't remember what I was eating, but I was eating the best meal I'd had all week, right? Because I was so poor. I was like, "Oh man, this is great." And then the actual director suddenly walks out to where we're all eating, and he says, "Does anyone here know how to pray?" And once again, I kind of looked to the left, looked to the right, nobody's volunteering. I was still a Texan, And he said, keep in mind, at this time, not everybody had cell phones. I mean, probably 50% of people had cell phones at this time. And he said, we cast a guy to play the son of one of the lead actors. And he has 2 scenes. One of the scenes, he has a lot of lines, and it's where the father's trying to talk him into not fighting, but he joins the cause. And that scene gets shot, 3 weeks from now. He goes, and then today, which happens later in the movie during the battle, he's in his first battle, and he looks out and sees the sea of redcoats, and he offers up a prayer of desperation. He said, so it's kind of a payoff moment. Then he dies. He said, we can't reach the guy who's supposed to be here at 6 a.m. Now it's noon or 1. He still hasn't gotten here. We've called his agent. We've called his apartment. Don't know where he is, but we can't wait. The show must go on. So if you'll do the prayer, we'll bring you back and you'll have this scene later. So I was like, yeah. So they march me out there, and the big scene happens. There's 100 redcoats and there's 100 colonial soldiers out here. And they put a camera right in my face. It's incredibly intimidating. And I offer up a silent prayer. And I get my SAG card as a result of this. So now instead of making $50 a day, I can go make $200 a day and have ice sculptures and eat lobster tail. And a week later, the whole movie collapsed. And the other scene never happened. And the movie never came out, which is another thing people don't realize if you've never worked in Hollywood, is that every movie a miracle. The fact that any movie makes it all the way from someone's idea to being on a movie screen or on your TV, so many things can and do go wrong. You think, well, now they've spent I have no idea how much they'd spent on this film at this time, millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, the entire film collapsed, and that is not unheard of in Hollywood. But it worked out great for me. Being a Texan, being able to shoot a gun and being able to pray turned my very first gig into a SAG card. So
that's amazing. My first the job that I got a SAG card on, actually, also the movie never got finished. Well,
Really?
it finished, but it never went to distribution. Yeah.
Never got distributed.
Yeah, they had some sort of legal issues and it just never went anywhere. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing. Yeah. I was so excited, and there were, it wasn't a huge film, but millions of dollars, to think, and all down the drain. It's crazy. Wow. I'm curious. You said that you don't think the solution to our problem is political. You were saying that earlier. So what do you think the solution is?
I think if you actually believe what conservatives purport to believe, if you believe that government should be limited and not central to every aspect of our lives, right. If you actually believe in values, if you actually believe in subsidiarity, if you believe that the smallest unit of government, the closest unit of government is the most important unit of government, sure. Then the smallest unit of government is the family.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you actually believe those things, then it is far more important that we live that way than that we force through the coercion of government to get smaller, we'll never win that battle. We're not going to force the government to get smaller. We're not going to force it to comport to values. All we can do is set the window of what government is able to do by how we live our lives. And that should be very encouraging, because it actually means we have a great deal of power, that if we live our lives in a particular way, government will necessarily follow. It won't follow at the rate that we like. It won't follow with specificity that we sometimes demand, but over time we will win. When we were a better people, we had better government. And now we are a worse people and we have worse government. And the temptation is to think you can use politics to make people good. But that's what the left believes. That is not what we believe.
No.
I'm not saying that there aren't important political fights. I'm not saying that you don't have a civic duty, but your fundamental duty as a person and your fundamental duty as a citizen are the same. And that's to live the best life that you can, the most virtuous life that you can, to work as hard as you can, to provide for your family, to instill in your family better values than what government seeks to put into them. And I think the conservatives in the 20th century, and in particular in the latter part of the 20th century, I think we abdicated a lot of our personal responsibility to government while claiming to believe in limited government. We essentially gave the government our kids until their 18th birthday, and maybe even longer if they go to a public university. And listen, I know it's hard. People need to make a living. I'm not saying that these solutions are easy. I'm only telling you that if you don't spend more time instilling your values in your children than the state spends instilling its values in your children, if you can't navigate your marriage and make it successful, I'm not saying that divorce being at an all-time high means people need government. I'm not saying that marriage is easy. I'm not saying that every marriage has to work no matter what. I'm only telling you that if you actually want a better country, a more virtuous country, and a better politics, you actually have to navigate a better life. And it'll be harder and it'll be slow. And you don't get to own the libs and you get to drink their delicious leftist tears. But that's the only place where there's actual victory, where there's actual hope. John Adams, it's almost cliche at this point to say that John Adams said that our form of government is meant for a a Christian religious people and and it won't work for anyone else. But it's absolutely true. Our constitutional republic is meant for a religious people. It's meant for a people who can be counted upon to govern themselves. And if we cannot govern ourselves, if we can't govern our families, then the state will step in and do it for us, and we will not like the result.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious about your vision for Daily Wire initially, how that's changed over the years and where you see it going now. I know, you're kind of in the midst of lots of changes, so
right.
It's all still developing, but yeah.
We brought in a consultant at the very beginning of the year to help us with sort of corporate culture. And by corporate culture, I mean, not like do we do free lunch for our employees or do we have casual Fridays? I mean, like at a deeper level, helping us take a vision and some values and instill them down throughout the company. Mm-hmm. This guy's great. He works with some of the biggest companies in the country. He's written best-selling books. He has a lot of insight, and he really helped us in a lot of ways. Now that I've complimented him, I'm going to tell you a funny story about him. He wanted us to have a mission statement. And he has good reason. I mean, a lot of his philosophy is built on this, and it's quite good. It's going to only sound like I think that it's all nonsense as I go forward with this story. But just know I actually think that he's right. And then this happens. And I said, well, what's a good mission? How do we arrive at a good mission statement? He said, well, it helps to think about your 3 defining aspects, cultural aspects of your company. So, let's just brainstorm a bunch of words that help us understand what makes Daily Wire unique, what's central to the Daily Wire. He goes, take some companies like maybe Southwest Airlines is a good example. What makes Southwest Airlines? And you could rattle off everything you know about them, no assigned seats, no first class, free carry-ons, no TVs in the back of the screens, all this kind of stuff that you know about them. But when you really narrow it down, you find that there's really these 3 things that all of those different aspects service. They want to be low cost. They want to democratize air travel. They want to be always on time. And they've discovered that when you have classes and all these different boarding groups, when you have TVs in the back of the seats that break, and now you have to hold the plane, so all of these things, so they want to be low cost, they want to be on time, and they want to be, I don't remember the other one, but these so we start brainstorming these, free associating these things about our company. And I said, well, I think if there's one really defining thing about our company is that we're for profit. We want to make a profit. And he said, no, stop right there. It's a very common mistake. Everybody thinks that desire for profitability is a defining aspect of their company. He goes, but it isn't. Making a profit is the result of being good at whatever you're good at. We're trying to figure out what actually defines you. And I thought about it for a minute. I said, no, that's it. Like, it truly defines us. I said, you have to understand the space that we're in, that the majority of conservative institutions are either not for profit, literally they're 501c3s, or they're functionally nonprofit. Right. So they may have a for-profit tax ID, but investors are constantly sort of refilling the coffers because they haven't figured out how to self-sustain or perpetuate their own growth. I said, that's not true for us. It is central to our identity in our space that since month 14, we've grown out of cash flow. That almost all of our growth since our startup phase has been powered by our own success. That makes us unique. It means we approach problems different than some of our peers in the space. We're not trying to figure out how to appeal to a donor. We're trying to figure out how to actually get customers to engage with our content. The result of that is we make things people want to read, not things people want to read. We make videos people want to see, not videos they want to see. He finally relents. He goes, well, okay, what's another one? And conservative, right? And we're not going to make anything that isn't, whatever we make, it's all going to sort of reinforce these values. He liked that one. That one definitely was. Yeah. He said, what's the third one? And I said, I think it's kind of this attitude, like that we're having a good time. And once again, he said, no, I think, everybody wants their employees to have a good time. I said, no, I'm not saying we want our employees to have a good time. We are having a blast. I said, we, like us. Like, you have to understand that, it's not a think tank. We're not dour. We don't think we lost. We're not a bunch of ho-hum conservatives, like Buckley used to say, we're not standing athwart the train tracks of history, hollering stop. Like we love the life that we get to live. We love the country. We love this moment. It's a horrible moment. It's terrible. Awful things are happening all around us. But this is the moment that we've been given. This is the moment where we get to have impact, where we get to have a say. We come to work happy. Yeah, it's exciting. We come to work happy. We go home happy. We're thrilled when we punch the left in the mouth. We're thrilled when we're just, the Politico gets 200 reporters on a phone call to have a morning session about the fact that Ben got asked to write a column for Politico, and I sent them 200 leftist tears tumblers. Like that doesn't serve any. It doesn't serve any business function. It cost us several $1,000s. Yeah. We're just doing it to amuse ourselves because we enjoy our work. We enjoy our. And he said, well, okay. He goes, so he said, I think what the mission of the company is now, understanding all of this, I think the mission is something like, to shape the culture for truth and freedom and truth. I said, that's beautiful. I said, but I want to scrap it. I said, I think the mission of the company is to do whatever the frack we want. And he said, what? I said, yeah. I said, what? I said, and this actually brings me to the point. I realize this was, I'm long-winded with these stories, but it's kind of a shaggy dog story, but here's the payoff. You can't save America without some Americans.
Yeah.
And Americans, historically, are people who do what they want.
Yes.
Americans are people who leave behind. Think about the fact that when our not our founders, but our forebears were being scalped on the plains of Texas, Dickens was writing A Tale of Two Cities.
Yep.
The world that we left behind was advanced. It was artistic. It had Mozart. It had hospitals. It had paved roads. And we came to this wilderness. And as soon as we settled the tiny eastern edge of it, we went into another wilderness. And as soon as we settled the Ohio Territory, we went into the next wilderness. And we just kept seeking out worse places to live where we could be free. And so Americans are cowboys. Americans are are adventurers. Americans are explorers. Americans push boundaries. Americans are pioneers. They have a good time. And they do hard things, not easy things. And they don't shirk from the fact that we're on the ropes politically and we're losing some battles. They keep going until they figure out how to win. They put a man on the moon. They don't just put a man in the moon. They design their own sports car, and then they put their sports car in space just because it's freaking cool.
Yeah.
And so that's what my vision for the Daily Wire, whatever it becomes in specifics, that's my vision. My vision for the Daily Wire is, I don't work for you guys. I'm an American. I'm having a good time. I'm doing what I want. I'm trying to figure out how to make it something that intersects what you want so you'll buy it. And I hope that more people will do that too. I hope that more people will remember to be Americans so that we can still have an America. Because what's in America if it's full of not Americans, right? And I don't mean that in any sort of like weird jingoistic. Americans come from all over the world. Americans primarily came from Europe in the olden days, but they've come over time from everywhere. And my definition of an American is, it's like that the poem that the statue has in the harbor. About everybody, the left always likes to talk about, I can't remember the words exactly, but it's like, give us your downtrodden and your humble and your, and the left is always like, see, we're supposed to give us your downtrodden, give us your, and I'm like, no, you got to read the next line of the poem is longing to be free.
Yeah.
If you're a downtrodden around the world longing to be free, I hope you find a way to get to America because we need more Americans. If you're a downtrodden looking to get something for free, you're not an American. That's not what America is all about. We're not a charity case. We're the people around the world who can leave behind what is because they have a vision for what may be. And so that's my vision for the Daily Wire.
That's awesome. I love it. So what do you think is the hope for America? Because you said that America is where people go to be free, right? And a lot of our freedoms are being taken away right now. I think that's irrefutable. So do you think there's much hope for us reclaiming our freedoms, and if not, then what? What happens to the free will of humanity? What happens to the world, really?
Well, a thing that can't go on forever won't go on forever. The idea that America will always be, or that freedom will always be in its current form just because it has been in our lifetimes is an amazingly narrow understanding of history, an amazingly hubristic view of the world. I don't know that America continues. I don't know that we don't lose it all. I don't know that we don't lose it in its current form. I don't know that it doesn't balkanize. I hope that doesn't happen.
Me too.
But those things can happen, and we may live to see them. But rather than saying what I think will happen, let me tell you what I hope happens.
Okay.
I hope that our fellow countrymen, some notable percentage of them, will stop believing that the next election is the most important election in human history, and because that attitude has both helped us win elections. Republicans are very good at winning elections. If you think about the fact that we do not have the majority of the population on our side anymore, and yet we still control the majority of state houses, the majority of governorships, and we win the presidency every now and then. And we, in living memory 2 years ago, controlled both branches of the legislature. We're good at winning elections against the odds. And you could say, yeah, but we're terrible at governing. Yeah, we are terrible at governing. That's good, because the people who don't believe in robust government should necessarily be worse governing.
Yeah.
But what we're bad at in this country is looking, as conservatives, the left is great at it. We're bad at looking past the next election. And I think part of it's because conservatives are disproportionately religious, and there's a kind of eschatological bent to Christianity in particular, which is the dominant religion in the country, where you sort of always think Jesus is going to come back tomorrow. And so it's hard to believe in the future. And this is why conservatives love to prep. We all have like 4 AR-15s and 5,000 rounds of ammunition and a bunch of food I hope we never have to eat. We all have that stuff because on some level, we're just all convinced the bottom's going to fall out any day now. That's a bad way to live.
Yeah.
The left believes in the future. And because they believe in the future, they believe in generational struggle. They can look past one single election and look at 40-year, 50-year, 60-year opportunities that lay in front of them. And what we're living through right now is the result of a cultural play that started in earnest in the 60s. And the cultural play in the 60s was a generational play that had started in the teens and 20s. The communists started infiltrating the country in the teens and the 20s. They co-opted the progressive movement in the teens and the 20s.
Yep.
They set the stage for what became the 60s, which set the stage for what's paying off right now. Yeah. And you go, it's all happening so fast. We went from 85% of people believing homosexuality was a sin to 85% of people believing in gay marriage in less than a decade. And now grown men are in women's locker rooms, and that didn't happen. You weren't paying attention when it was really happening, which was in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s.
Yep. When the DSM was changing their terms
that's
constantly. Right. Yep.
And we're not going to get, and I'm not trying to harp on any one of those issues. I'm only talking about the rapidity of change.
Yeah.
We're not going to get a more conservative country. We're not one election away. Donald Trump 2024 coming back and defeating the left once and for all is a freaking pipe dream. And it's worse than a pipe dream. It's a death sentence for conservatism if you believe that way.
Right.
This is a generational struggle. We have to do what the left did. Look beyond one election, beyond 2 elections, beyond our lifetime. We have to think the way our forebears thought. What if our children got to have a better life than us, and we were slightly less selfish and planted seeds now that won't grow in our lifetime or won't come to fruition in our lifetime? We won't reap. And with that attitude, we can learn a lot from what the left did. We can build a counterculture now that 40 years from now is the dominant culture.
Yeah.
The left did not have, they were a fringe in the first half of the 20th century, and they were a college movement in the 60s, and now they're everything. They own it all, every institution, all government, even when Republicans win. But we can do that too. And we've got some things on our side that they don't have. Truth, reality, the fact that our ideas actually comport to reality. Maybe what took them 60, 80 years takes us 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah.
But if we're not up for that fight, we deserve to lose.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. What do you see so Daily Wire, you started out like, it's interesting for me just because I've known you before Daily Wire.
Right.
So I have like all these questions I could ask, but I know some of the answers, but I'd love you to explain them. So what were your thoughts when you first went into it? Daily Wire started out much more news oriented. You're now shifting into much more not entertainment arena. We have films that you're starting to do, a bunch of the podcasts that are really more like shows. It's a very interesting, the whole podcast phenomenon is fascinating because it's kind of this hybrid of like regressing to radio but also television, and it's kind of a weird hybrid of the two, but in very much progressive in that sense. So yeah, I'm curious about the trajectory of that and what you think, what your goals are with moving more into entertainment.
Yeah. Well, I've always believed conservatives are very good at critiquing culture, but we don't make any culture, and you can't bitch your way into cultural hegemony, right? Like you actually have to make some culture. You have to make some things that people want. And for a long time, there was a large number of us in Hollywood and in LA who would talk about these things, but there weren't great opportunities to enact them. I started a company, as you know, called Declaration Entertainment back in, 2008, 2009. And, on the goal of that company was that we were going to have subscribers who gave us monthly subscription dues. And then we would use that money to create films, to create culture for conservatives.
Right.
In some ways, the idea was ahead of its time because it was before Indiegogo became prominent or before GoFundMe became prominent. It was before SVOD became incredibly prominent and was attempting to be some sort of hybrid of those three things. You see a lot of people doing what I was trying to do then successfully, not just on the right, but everywhere now.
Sure.
So in some ways, I had this sort of forward-looking concept. In other ways, I was the problem. It's not just that the idea was ahead of its time. It's that I wasn't ready yet. I didn't know anything about business. I hadn't been through enough failures. But I say all of that to say it's always been on my mind that might be a model in the future. I had to go through it and fail and learn a bunch of lessons. During that period of time, I was becoming friendly with Ben Shapiro, and I really thought, Ben is a unique individual. He has a mind like no one else I've ever met. He has a capacity for framing arguments and debate that I've never encountered before. And I think he can be something really special for our generation. He needs a little help. So I got like a Hollywood hair and makeup and wardrobe team together, and we went over to Ben's house and we cut his hair, and we did like a Queer Eye for the Straight Guy kind of thing, where we went through his closet and threw out all of his clothes, and bought him all these new clothes and kind of, helped transform the aesthetic of Ben Shapiro a little bit. And then I was, because of our organization, Friends of Abe, I was friends with a lot of the board members from the David Horowitz Freedom Center. And I thought, Ben is a natural heir to David. They're both Southern California Jewish men of high intellect but despite their intellect, they're more interested in the fight than in the thoughts. It's not, as David used to say of his center, it's not a think tank, it's a battle tank. I think that I just feel like that is Ben. They're very similar guys. And so I started working behind the scenes to convince these board members and ultimately David that Ben would be a good heir. And I was successful at that. It took about 18 months. But over time, some of those seeds I planted found their moment, and David, completely on his own, had the idea that Ben should be his heir. Completely on his own after 18 months of me meeting with board members. And
Best strategy. Make them think it's their idea.
That's right. And so Ben and I went over to the Freedom Center and started a website called Truth Revolt. And we took some pals who we'd met along the way from like PJTV and the Breitbart sphere, some people who we deserved a little bit broader circulation, Andrew and Bill Whittle, and others. And we started this group. And we had rapid success. And it was certainly a precursor to the Daily Wire, but it was a little bit more active because it was within a nonprofit. It wasn't a for-profit business. So we did some more activism type work. Very quickly became one of the greatest successes that the Freedom Center had had in some time. With that success came the need for more money. We had a $1 million budget for that first year. And now the second year was upon us and they wanted us to go do some fundraising. I don't know anything about fundraising. Ben doesn't know anything about fundraising. We kind of thought the deal was we'll make the content and you guys are good at the fundraising. They saw it a little bit differently. And so I started trying to conceive of a way that we wouldn't have to go back to donors year after year. Because I very quickly during that second round of fundraising realized that there's some real problems with this nonprofit model that the right is so in love with. I mean, first of all, we're the proponents of capitalism, and yet we use charity to fund all of our ideological institutions. The left hates capitalism, and yet they use for-profit businesses to evangelize their values. This is a major problem. No wonder they win. For-profit works better than not-for-profit. And also there's a kind of mission creep that necessarily happens in conservative nonprofits, because when you go back to the same donors year after year, they actually want something new to get excited to give another check. And if you just tell them, well, we're doing really well at what we do, they kind of lose interest in it. And so I conceived of this idea that I saw this opening in social media, this opening with Facebook, and I had this idea that if they would give us $800,000 to spend marketing our content on social media, that I felt like I could drive success through advertisement to a level where they would never have to give us another dollar. And the whole Freedom Center could remain a nonprofit organization, but our little wing of it would be for profit. And they should be happy about that because we were getting a lot of headlines for them and they wouldn't have to share any of their money with us and we wouldn't have to go ask anybody for money. And so we pitched this to a few of the board members. They didn't understand what we were talking about. Some of them remained my very close friends, but they still didn't understand what we were talking about. Average age death, right? Like not a young group of guys. So one of our allies on the board who remains a close friend today, but also didn't understand what we were trying to accomplish, he at least said, well, you should come pitch the board where you can really lay this out for us. So we go into this board meeting and Ben calls me the stupid whisperer because I don't talk super fast and I didn't go to Harvard and I don't have 160 IQ, but I'm good at getting regular folk to understand ideas.
It's like 159, but yeah.
So even the stupid whisperer could not explain to the board how you could make this work. So they said, tell us one more time. I told them, tell us one more time. And make this simple for us. So Ben, in frustration, turns over a cocktail napkin and he draws a dollar sign.
This is like the most cliche, the napkin business plan.
He draws a dollar sign with an arrow to an F for Facebook with an arrow to a computer, which was our website, with an arrow back to the dollar sign. And he said, that's our business plan. And they fired us. Now, they didn't fire us on the spot, and they didn't really fire Ben. They fired me and all of our employees. They wanted to keep Ben, but Ben had the, I think Ben had the class to go ahead and quit after all of his employees got fired. And we really just, and we went and found some for-profit minded investors who understood the cocktail napkin and helped us get started. Now, a lot changes. You have to be nimble, and being in business is like standing on a rubber ball, trying to balance. A lot changes, but essentially, from the germ that was Declaration Entertainment to the germ that was that business plan at the Freedom Center came the foundations of the Daily Wire. And in that sense, what we're doing now, moving toward culture, is an extension of what I've always been doing. But the opportunity that was there before us immediately to help us pay our bills after we lost Truth Revolt, we just got the band back together. The same group of people we had hired initially, the same writers who are news writers, the same editors, a lot of the same talent, Ben, Clavin, came over. And we just kept doing what we were doing, slightly less focus on activism and a lot more focus on making profit. And I would just say that as we've succeeded over the last 6 years, the opportunity, success begets opportunity. That's what the nonprofit model never allows you to see.
Yeah.
Success has now begat the opportunity to kind of look a little bit deeper into our past and see, well, now we really could make some of these cultural plays, which is where we think the real victory for the movement is long term, is in getting out of just criticizing and get busy making. Conservatives are makers, except when it comes to politics, and then we're just bitchers. We got to get back to being makers.
That's absolutely true. Do you envision the cultural content that you're creating being similar to what we're used to in terms of movies, television? Do you have a different vision for it? Yeah.
I guess that in the same way that our political content, because it's for profit, I said earlier, we try to make content that people want to read, not content that they want to read.
Yeah.
The same is true with our cultural play. Historically, I think in recent years, when religious people or conservatives do get the opportunity to make something, they make something that people should want to see. They make something that you support, not something that you
enjoy.
That you enjoy. Yeah. So our first film, Run, Hide, Fight, if you haven't seen it, it's at the Daily Wire. You can come over and give it a watch. If you haven't seen it, I think you'll be surprised. It's not what people expected from us. It's not about a ragtag bunch of high school football players who get a new coach who believes in Jesus, but really gets it, that's not what it is. It's edgier. It's harder. It's TVMA or rated R. It wasn't rated R by the MPAA, but it would be if we sought an MPAA rating. It has disturbing violence, harsh language, brief nudity. It was important to me that our first film set sort of the outer boundary of what's permissible, because I knew that some of our audience would be alienated. Some of our audience would be disappointed in us. They wouldn't get what we were trying to accomplish. And I wanted to dispel that right up front. If you're going to be disappointed, if this isn't for you, I want you to be able to make that decision from day one. I don't want to make 5 things that trick you into thinking that we are what we're not. And then when we finally make something that is what we are, you're disappointed.
Right.
One way that I say it is, HBO bought the rights to Sesame Street. You can make Game of Thrones and then make Sesame Street, but you can't make Sesame Street and then make Game of Thrones.
Probably
now, we would not make something as far as harsh or gratuitous as Game of Thrones. I think Game of Thrones is great, wonderful content, but it's not for us. It's not what we're trying to do. But we are trying to make, as I say, culture that people want to engage with. In particular, our audience is disproportionately young, disproportionately male. Our average audience is probably like between 17 and 34 men, young men. And if they were going to get their values from Sunday school, we wouldn't be in the shape that we're in, because they've had that option this whole time. They want heroes, they want struggles, they want to be challenged, they want to actually have to think, they don't want to take their values on faith. And so we want to make content that accomplishes those things, that tells truthful, if fictional, truthful stories about what life is really like. Fictionalized, right? Exaggerated, because that's what art has to do. But that actually reflect what people experience in life, or respect at least what they aspire to in life. You need heroes, not because you're a hero, but because of your aspirations.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think we want to make, content that if James Dobson loves it, we probably failed. God bless James Dobson. He's got an important role to play. But he's already out there playing that role. We're trying to play a different role, accomplish a different thing, and he will necessarily not love what we do. And I think that's a very good thing.
Yeah. Are you planning to keep like all of your content through like the websites model, or are you looking for other distribution for film?
Right now, we're trying to compete at the SVOD level, streaming video on demand, Netflix, Hulu. Listen, Netflix has 200 million subscribers.
Yeah.
We're not going to compete with Netflix.
Right. It's a good goal, though. You got to aim high.
Aim high.
You never know.
Some of the smaller SVOD platforms, Starz, Showtime, they live in a zone where they have 7 million subscribers, 12 million subscribers, maybe 15 at the very biggest. They produce a lot of content that's culturally impactful. Some of the best shows, some of my favorite shows are on those networks, and that is attainable for the Daily Wire. And if you achieve that, I think today that is more important than the box office. It's more important than theaters. If you attain that, you'll have done something that conservatives have not done in any of our lifetimes. You'll have created an actual destination for content that reflects our values, our high level values, not necessarily all of our particulars, our high level values. And so for right now, that's the goal. Would we ever put a film in theaters? Yeah, I think we would. Would we ever release content for free? Certainly, I think we would on social or whatever. But to make the play work over time, we need people to subscribe to our SVOD platform the same way they subscribe to so many others. And the reason people say, oh, you think you're going to outcompete Netflix? Well, of course not. Is Netflix the only one you have? Most of us subscribe to 3 or 4 of these things already. I don't want you to not have Netflix. I don't want you to not get to watch The Mandalorian season 3 over at Disney or whatever. But I also want you to be able to get content that reflects your values. So I think that we can gain these subscribers not by taking them away from anyone else, but by offering a value proposition that no one else is offering. Disney isn't going to give you this kind of content. Netflix isn't going to give you this kind of content.
Right.
I'm going to watch the next Stranger Things over on Netflix. But if you want to see the next Braveheart, it ain't happening unless some audience somewhere starts backing those people in our movement who could make that kind of content. And we want to be that place. We want to be that destination.
Awesome. What would you say is the biggest challenge that you've encountered and maybe the biggest surprise?
On the entertainment play in particular, I would say the biggest challenge has been that people won't work with us. People on our side, people with our values. I ran an organization called Friends of Abe for many years. That's how you and I met. We had close to 3,000 industry professionals from Hollywood in that organization, very private. I mean, we're on the front page of the New York Times, but generally very private.
Really private. The good kind of private that every publicist aims to have,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of great talent out there on our side.
Yeah.
A lot of subpar mediocre talent on our side too. And listen, the reason that there's a lot of subpar mediocre talent on our side is because no one has actually created the ability for the people who are talented to have something more than a job. See, you could go to a very successful Hollywood producer who can make amazing content and who lives a completely closeted life. Everybody in LA just assumes they're left. And you could say, hey, come over here and make a movie for us. I'll even pay you. I got a billionaire to give me $25 million and I'll give you the $25 million budget and you can make $1 million, you can make a great movie. And they'll say, yeah, that's a job.
Right.
But to take that job, I will be forfeiting my career. A career doesn't pay me $1 million. A career pays me a salary every year for 40 years. It lets me put my kids through school and then high school and then college. It lets me pay off a mortgage. It lets me have a retirement. So yes, you're offering me a job. That is not enough. And in that world, the best talent will never come over and work with you, even if they agree with you. And you only get the mediocre talent because, candidly, most of the mediocre talent, not most, a lot of the mediocre talent could become great talent. But you only become great talent with at-bats, with trial and error. And so when conservatives make no movies, you make 3 conservative movies a year, they have average budget like $385,000, and nobody good works on them to be mentors, then you wind up with a lot of mediocre talent, because what else could we become?
Yeah.
And so, for me, that's one of the challenges, is getting those very established, very good people who can make great content to believe in our mission, not just on a one movie basis or a one show basis, but to see that if they stick their necks out, if they support us, we actually have a shot at building something over here that can give people careers, that can cultivate talent across an entire, career from being green to being very established.
Yeah.
So far, I've not gotten enough people to buy into that vision. And so it's very slow going to develop good content, because we can't put out bad content.
No.
We have to put out great content. So that's been I think the biggest challenge and the biggest disappointment. I understand it. I know why people don't want to stick their necks out, but man, there are some people who you're just like, you've made your money. You've done it. If you're not willing to take a hit now, if you're not willing to stick your neck out, who will ever stick their neck out? Our founders were convinced that if they were, and some of them, if you're captured, you will be killed. And we can't even get people to risk being shunned, like to risk being thought poorly of by people who hate everything that they're for. So even though I'm sympathetic to the plight, it is a frustration. It is a real challenge, and one that we're working hard to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the biggest challenge in terms of, you said that you weren't ready when it was right.
Right.
You hadn't had your failures. You didn't know much about business. What would you say was the biggest lesson in business that you learned, and what challenges prompted you to learn that?
Yeah, my paternal grandfather was from a completely different generation. He was truly a cowboy.
Yeah.
When he was 13, his mother had died, and his father was a drunk, and so he at 13 moved out, took his younger brother with him, and started working for the richest guy in town. I mean, it was a town of 1,000 people, so richest guy in town was probably not rich, right? But this family took him in. They let him sleep in the shed out back. They let the younger brother, who was still, I don't know, 7 or 8, sleep inside. But my grandfather was only allowed to sleep in the shed out back. And that family owned a very small popcorn popper cart. Back during those days, people went to the movies every week. And he would stand out in front of the little local movie theater, even in small towns, and sell popcorn for whatever it was, 5 cents a bag. And that's how he paid for his brother to live in the house and him to live in the shed. And then when he got to be 15 or something, he started a cowboy on those big West Texas ranches. He was very old by the time I was born. My father's his youngest son, 18 years younger than his oldest son. And he was still the foreman on a very small ranch called the Sand Creek when I was born. So he had cowboyed his entire life, except for one small window. There's a small window when my father was a child, where my grandfather and a friend started a business doing irrigation, plumbing, and even pool installations, although there were very few pools back then, in the hard caliche earth of eastern New Mexico on the Llano Estacado. And, this is brutal work, trying to dig down into that caliche to lay irrigation pipe, and at a time when that stuff was really just starting in earnest, Yeah. And for the first time, he was making a living. I don't know what a living was. Was a living $10,000 a year? It may have been, right? But he was making a living. He could. He lived in town instead of in a ranch house out on the ranch, and he. What happens though, and I don't know all the details of the story, but the partner absconds with some of the money and disappears. And my grandfather was the blue collar part of the operation. The partner was the business guy. And my grandfather was out digging in the dirt all day, and the partner was getting gigs and opening bank accounts and finding clients. he absconds with some of the money and leaves them with like $8,000 of debt. And so my grandfather now is responsible for that $8,000 of debt, and it wiped him out completely. I don't know how long, but I'm sure it took him a long time to pay it all off, years to pay it all off. And he was a proud man. He was humiliated, I think, by the experience, and deep sense of betrayal, deep sense of loss. And he could never get back on that horse again. Instead, he got back on the real horse and went out and went back to ranching. I have a lot of respect and love for my grandfather, but he learned the exact wrong lesson. The reality of business is that someone always absconds with the money. There's always bills that you can't pay. The truth is, I've never been cheated by a partner. Every time I've had to pay off, every time I've had to pay off the money, it's because of my own mistakes, because of the things I couldn't do, because of things I wasn't ready for. I've failed with Declaration Entertainment, and I failed with Truth Revolt, fundamentally. I failed with a production company. I failed with several films. I've raised a lot of money. I've lost a lot of money. I've hired a lot of people and they've lost their jobs. It didn't work. And every time, instead of being humiliated, instead of being defeated, I've just tried to learn the lesson and then climb back up on the horse and try again and try to make a different set of mistakes this time than you made last time. And I do think that there are two kinds of people in this regard. My grandfather, in so many ways, a much, much better man than me. In this way, he wasn't capable of succeeding in business. He thought he wasn't capable of succeeding in business because of his failure. The truth is, he wasn't capable of succeeding in business because of what his failure did to him. Because everyone who succeeds in business is well acquainted with failure. And what you fundamentally have to do is fail fast, learn the lesson, and keep going. And so, I think the hardest lesson in business is to learn to fail. It's to learn to still be able to face yourself when you fail, to learn to pay for your mistakes and then try again. And I think that it's not for everyone,
Sure.
I don't begrudge my grandfather going back to work on the ranch. I don't begrudge people who work salary jobs their entire life. My father's a railroader, and I think he's one of the great railroaders. I mean, I'll brag on my dad for a minute. He recently retired, and they told him no, they'd never seen anyone with a higher pension because he never took, because your pension's like based on an average of so many years of work. He would never take off work. He would always work the hard jobs. He had a reputation as being just a stickler for the rules, always on time, did exactly what he was supposed to do. Great railroader. But he used to tell me, as much as I work during my shift, when I climb down off the engine, I don't care if 30 feet later the train falls off the track. It's not my train. It's mine for the 12 hours that I'm on it. And I'm going to do my absolute level best. And when I go home, I'm able to totally disassociate from this. I'm able to live my life. I'm able to sleep, not worry about it. When you're in business, you never get to do that.
No.
It's always your problem. It's your problem before it gets to you. It's your problem after it goes down the track. And so I don't begrudge my father or my grandfather. I don't begrudge people in any way who work jobs for wages. It's probably the saner thing to do, and you get to have a more balanced life, I think, if you do it. But there's this other group of us who, for whatever reason, we're just wired a little bit different. Some people are, I'm not saying that it's a better thing. It's just a different thing. I am wired to keep freaking trying. And I plan to keep freaking trying until they carry me out.
Yeah. Yeah, they say, what did Churchill say? Success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. So
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it, exactly.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I think we've gone way over. I have one more question. It's kind of a two-part question for you. And and then any closing things you want to say. But so you are a new father.
Yes.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
What are so this is two-part. The first part of it would be, are there any kind of concerns about just the current milieu that we are in, and certainly running a conservative organization in this environment, and the perils that your child may face with that, and yeah, what are your biggest hopes for the culture and the environment that you could create and instill for her?
Yeah.
Sorry, the big question that you can answer in like 1 second, Sorry.
She's going to be fine. No. Of course, I worry about her constantly. She is being born into an incredibly challenging reality, a reality where we live in a world that hates women, first of all, a world that's seeking to erase women completely. How does she navigate that? I don't know. A world that hates all of the values that I'll endeavor to instill in her. A good friend of mine, and I believe a friend of yours, I won't name them, told me once of his son. He said, I actually don't know if it's the right thing to raise my son with my values, because I know that I'm setting him up for such a hard life if I do. It took my breath away when he said it. I guess that as a person of faith, I know that my daughter will have, in this world, she'll have her problems. I know that we're not promised a good life. We're not promised that things will go our way. In fact, we're probably promised that they won't. And so I hope to instill in her a desire for the things that transcend our day-to-day experience. But yeah, of course, I worry for her. I think, though, that you can focus on those problems and not in any way prepare her to have her own life. At the end of the day, it's been said many times, your job as a parent is not to raise children, but to raise adults. I want to raise my daughter to be an adult, to be a fully formed individual with the capacity to reason for herself. I want to present her with all the best arguments against my values. I think one mistake that parents often make, they make it out of love, but I think it's I think it's about the worst thing you can do, is you raise your kids not to think critically about your values. And when you present them with the argument against your values, it's always a dismissive argument. It's a straw man argument.
Right.
And then when they get off to high school, they get off to college, or they get off into the quote unquote real world, they're presented not with your straw man oppositional argument, but the real thing. And they're not in any way prepared to answer it. And now they have to deal with the fact that they're finding out that what you taught them may not be true, and that you're a liar. So I just think you have to, prepare your kids for the reality of what's coming their way. It doesn't mean from day one. I mean, right?
Right. At 2 months, it's a good time to start.
I think that over time, that's what I hope, is to raise an adult who can face these challenges for herself and think critically. And, my highest hope is that she'll know that her strength isn't to be found in herself, and her hope isn't to be found in herself or in her accomplishments or in politics or in this world at all, but in God.
Yeah. So I did say I have one other question. What is the biggest change for you? Because you were saying some people are wired differently, right? And you clearly have the risk-taking gene, which there is. It's the RDR4 with the 7th allele, the risk-taking gene. You clearly have it. So, and I'm wondering if things have changed since you've become a father. What is the biggest change for you? And would you still take the same types of risks?
Yeah. I have a responsibility now, obviously, as I'm old to be taking on this responsibility. There are a lot of people who probably are listening to your podcast who are much younger than me, who who have possessed this wisdom for much longer than me. But yes, there are some risks that I would be reluctant to take now that I would have taken in my youth. Risks with my own safety, even some risks with my money. At the same time, you owe your children your very best. You owe your children you. Like, that's the number one thing your kids need, is you.
Yeah.
But I don't want to make an idol of myself either. I don't want to make an idol of my accomplishments. You know, I don't know a lot of kids with a trust fund who were better for it. I don't know a lot of kids who had everything that they could have ever hoped for who were better for it. I don't know a lot of kids for whom some reasonable adversity didn't improve them. So I guess what I would say is, first of all, go to Policy Genius and get a life insurance policy, as we often say on our podcast, because they're great sponsors. But I did get a life insurance policy when I had a daughter. But I don't want to be other than I am.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to set an example for my daughter of fearfulness. I don't want to set an example for my daughter of clinging to life at all costs. You know, muzzle yourself with a mask and avoid everyone you ever see. I mean, I know this is just a fleeting moment, but that attitude will still be with us. And I want that attitude. Yeah. I want to show my daughter that that's the wrong attitude. You do have to take risk. You know, if my business goes belly up, I want her to have just as fulfilling a life in whatever small apartment I can afford as she would have in my current station. If I should die, I want there to be mechanisms from the community that I create and the family that I leave behind to still instill these values that I have in her. I don't want me or my accomplishments to be the central defining aspects of her life. I want my values to be the defining aspect of her life. And so, I don't know, Court, I'm probably not smart enough to stop taking risks. You know, I'll probably just keep right on doing it and hope she gets the good stuff. You know.
Well, I will champion your desire to take those risks. You're doing great things. You said that you want her to ultimately know that, you know, to put her faith in God. And I'm curious if you think, and you also were saying, you know, this is a fleeting moment with the mask, right? And, you know, COVID, whatnot. Do you think the response to COVID is in part because of the loss of religion in society?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, there are exceptions to all of this. It's mass hypnosis on a scale not only that we've never seen, but that was never possible before the complete ubiquity of social media. And against the kind of onslaught that we faced, the information and emotion onslaught that we faced, it's hard to begrudge so many people buying into it. When people are telling you to be scared every single moment of your day, it's hard not to be scared. You have to be a little crazy to look away from it and not be scared. Yeah. You can't begrudge somebody in a horror film from jumping at the spooky part. It's designed to do that. At the same time, while I'm sure that there are some faithful people who have been swept up in this, I'm fairly certain that if you really dig down into the data, you'll find that the more someone puts their fervent faith in God, the less susceptible they've been to all of this. Because in the final analysis, I don't think that Sinatra was right. I don't think that the guy who dies with the most crap wins. I don't think that the purpose of life is life. I don't think that the best thing you can do is prolong it as much as possible. You know, the purpose of life is to live. The thing that God wants from us is to live. He wants us to live with a kind of optimism. You know, he says, be fruitful and multiply before sin enters the world. That's a fundamentally optimistic ask. It's the fundamental thing is, you say, how's that optimistic? Because it says to have children, anybody who's ever contemplated having children knows this, it's scary to have kids. It's scary because the world's always falling apart. Imagine having kids during the First World War when people were dying at the Somme or being stomped into the mud at Flanders. Like, we think it's bad now. It's been worse. It's always terrifying. And what God is saying is, no, don't make yourself central to the story. Believe that there's something better ahead. Be fruitful, multiply. I don't want to hang on to life too much. It's a fleeting thing. I want to hold to it lightly. I want to live it. I want my daughter to live it. I want people who listen to this podcast to live it. I want people who come to the Daily Wire to live it. I said earlier, you can't save America if you don't live like an American. Part of what it means to live like an American is to live, not to fearfully cling to your last breath.
That's not living.
That's not living. Only in America do people have conversations like this actual conversation that happened once in America. Hey, when you're finished repairing that bicycle, you want to see if we can literally fly?
Yeah.
That is a fundamentally American idea. And the guy who does that, the guy who takes a bicycle, puts wings and a propeller on it, and goes paddling his way into the air, is not trying to hang on to every last possible second of life. That's a guy who's living.
Yeah.
That's what we got to do.
Amen. Well, thank you so much. This was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if you have any closing comments, and let people know, go to the Daily Wire and wherever else you want them to find you.
Go to dailywire.com. If you don't subscribe, we'd appreciate it if you do. I'll admit it's a little missional now, but we're adding value all the time.
Absolutely. I support that.